The introductory training primarily covers options, manual tools, and working through an actual scan. It depends slightly depending on the answers given during the questionnaire process, because we do like to cater the intro training towards the team that we're working with, because we also use that to build the advanced training agenda. But we do cover scan options, the manual penetration testing tools, different uses and scenarios, how we utilize the app, how we our naming schemes when we deal with options and templates. So it covers the gamut of the application itself, plus some additional features and practical work within the application as it pertains to the team. The introductory training is for beginning to intermediate users of Acunetix. Users who have had some experience in pen testing and understand network security and web application security. Ideally, we'd like to have the training for both the application security team and the developers. It brings those two teams together, it helps those two teams bounce ideas off each other, and focuses in on their team and how they apply what they learned in the class. The benefit of having both application security testers and the developers on the same training and on the same team is ideally to work the two teams together to have, there's a lot of things during scanning, like reduction of scan time, that benefits greatly from having the developers there to understand what the content is, especially when you're working with the two teams together. And ultimately, we'd like to see that the application testing is worked into the software development lifecycle. As I mentioned earlier, the advanced training is based on the agenda that we developed during the intro training. So understanding how the team works together, whether they use it for compliance, whether they use it for internal tests, or for whether it's part of the software development lifecycle. And per that process, we learned they need instruction in reduction of scan time. Do they need tutorials to go over SQL injection or cross-site scripting? Do they need to understand cross-site scripting? And then we work with their team to kind of work with inside their scans, because that ultimately is the most important. Their challenges are their internal scans or their scans for whatever scope of work they have. And working through that with them helps them move forward in their projects. It also gives them a practical application as opposed to a canned scenario that maybe doesn't apply to them. Some good examples of advanced training topics that we come across. I'd say probably the most common is reduction of scan time. Reduction of scan time comes into play, and at some point, if it hasn't already, it will within an environment, especially with authenticated scans. The reduction of scan time will cover in dealing with duplication, working within exclusions and inputs. And a lot of times it helps to have both the developers and the application security testers together on that, because it helps the scanners to understand what it is that they can reduce without hurting the integrity of the scan. Other common topics would be dealing with false positives and understanding whether or not something is a false positive. Again, that helps when the developers are there, but working through their scenarios and seeing, is this a false positive? How can we prove it? Work within the manual tools to do so. Another area is to cover different technologies they have, whether they're dealing with Cold Fusion, PHP, ASP.NET. Another thing is to work through Acusensor and understand what Acusensor brings to them as far as turning a black box scan into a black box, or a black box and a white box scan. It becomes imperative for internal sites, if they can and they have ASP.NET or PHP, to utilize the Acusensor. Other areas would be walking through blended threats or using cross-site scripting, whether it's reflective or server-based, and walking through their teams, their team's challenges with cross-site scripting alerts that they get is another area that we focus on. Well, training is important because it differentiates the organizations that will get an application like Acunetix and will start scanning and then just kick off the canned scans and maybe make very few changes within the scanning profiles or the scan options. Where the training comes in is allows you to understand what you're scanning, because no two scans are alike. You come in, you scan, you make changes, and you tweak your scans. You adjust your crawl. You learn what you may be missing. Of course, Acunetix allows you to automatically scan your web applications, but if that's all you're doing and you're not going in and understanding what you're scanning, you're missing out on a whole lot of other possible vulnerabilities and areas that really should have focus. the training is delivered, and the intro training, it is instructor-led both for the intro and the advanced. The intro, we need to cover the basics of the application as well as the options and get through a list of things that we want to cover. I also want to focus in on areas that they have requested during questionnaire time. The other piece of it is even though it is instructor-led, we do past presenter roll off to them during the advanced training to work within their scans. That gives them the opportunity to show us what their challenges have been. But it is web-based, it is over conference, and we do encourage question and answer throughout the training.